Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. Today we are going to try and tackle the story behind a symbol, a pretty iconic symbol, the Lacoste crocodile. You guys have sent in a really amazing set of material for this one, everything from news reports about, some recent happenings to the captivating origin story of the brand itself. And I think our goal is to, go through all this stuff and try to find the crucial insights and the turning points that help to, shape this instantly recognizable brand.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton here.
Yeah.
I think we've got everything we need from the, early days of Lacoste as a, tennis brand, competitive tennis, all the way through, the global trademark disputes, and even how Lacoste is adapting to the modern marketplace. I mean, it's really kind of a fascinating journey.
Yeah, and I think, the question that comes to mind for a lot of listeners is probably, why should I care about the story behind a polo shirt with a little crocodile on it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason is this is more than just fashion. This is an example of how a seemingly small idea, even maybe a joke, can evolve into a global presence, a huge global presence. We're going to explore how the brand has, gone through really intricate legal battles over their logo, right? Like, how do you protect something like that? How they've navigated this kind of tricky world of social responsibility, what it means to be a brand today.
Yeah.
And then plus, it's just a terrific illustration of how innovation in sport, right, can unexpectedly become a major force in the fashion industry.
Absolutely.
So get ready for some surprising developments and hopefully some valuable insights into, what it takes to build and sustain a brand, a really powerful brand like this.
So let's unpack this thing starting from the very beginning with the man himself.
Yeah. The Lacoste story, it really comes down to the drive and the determination of René Lacoste. Born in 1904. I mean, he was a force in tennis, international tennis, 7 Grand Slam titles. What's interesting, though, is that his family, upper class background, they didn't necessarily support his ambitions on the court.
Yeah, and I remember seeing in one of the videos you showed that his father gave him this 5-year challenge. It was basically like, prove you can be a world champion or, go get a real job, essentially. Like, that's a pretty serious, ultimatum to be given, right? But clearly he had the fire in him, the competitive spirit. I mean, he debuted at Wimbledon in 1922, which doesn't go super well. It was a first-round loss.
Right.
But just a year later, he is competing in the U.S., and he makes it to the 4th round. And 1923 was also the year that he was selected for the Davis Cup team, which really marked the beginning of that legendary Four Musketeers era, with Barotro, with Bruggen and 𝗁𝗂. I mean, that was a defining period for René Lacoste. He reached his first major final at Wimbledon in 1925, lost to his fellow musketeer, Jean Barotro. But the very next year, 1926, he wins not only the French championship, but Wimbledon. And, beats Barotro in a rematch. I mean, by the end of that year, he was, considered to be the world's #1 player by the Daily Telegraph. And then, also on the side, kind of innovating. He's credited with inventing the tennis ball machine. So this wasn't just, a talented athlete. This is someone that was, constantly thinking about the game, about how to improve.
So you have this fiercely competitive, innovative tennis star. But how does he become the namesake of, this huge brand, the little green crocodile? How does that happen?
Right.
Well, it's interesting. It all goes back to the 1926 Davis Cup final against the United States. American journalists are covering this match. They're watching René Lacoste play, and they're so struck by his tenacious and relentless style on the court. Right. They start describing his movements as predatory, and that leads to the now famous nickname, right?
The crocodile.
The crocodile.
Yeah.
And then there's this anecdote about the nickname that's pretty memorable. I mean, as the story goes, it shows up in a bunch of the sources you sent in.
Right.
He makes a bet with his team captain, and the prize, a crocodile skin suitcase.
Wow.
If he won this crucial match.
Yeah.
So he ends up winning. It's not actually clear if he actually ever got the suitcase.
Interesting.
But the nickname it just captured the public's imagination. And it's stuck.
It's stuck, yeah. And then, a friend of René's, Robert George, actually designed this emblem for him, this crocodile emblem. Now, this wasn't intended as a commercial logo or anything.
Right.
But René had it embroidered onto his blazer and, started wearing it. And can you imagine just the impact of that?
Yeah.
This unique personal symbol.
So you have this incredible athlete with a catchy nickname.
Right.
A personal logo. But to go from that personal emblem to global fashion brand status, right? You need a different kind of vision.
Absolutely.
And René, as an athlete, he was tuned into the discomfort and the restrictions of the traditional tennis attire of the time. I mean, think about it. Like long-sleeved button-up shirts
Oh, yeah.
to play tennis in?
That's got to be hot.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So he identifies this problem, right? And he's an innovator, so what does he do? He sets about creating a solution. He designs what would become the original version of the modern tennis uniform, the short-sleeved jersey knit polo shirt. I mean, think about how groundbreaking that was at the time.
Huge,
Right.
huge. So you have this, this shift in, sportswear. But to bring this to a wider audience, he needs the manufacturing partner. So in 1933, he joins forces with André 𝗤𝗄𝗄𝗃.
Yeah.
Now, André owned the largest knitwear manufacturing firm in France, and they begin producing these, shirts with that now iconic embroidered crocodile.
And that is the official birth of the brand.
Yeah.
Right. So the company is registered as 𝗤𝗄𝗃𝗃 Lacoste.
Yeah.
And essentially, René becomes like the ultimate walking billboard. He is showcasing this product on the world stage.
Right.
And so this polo shirt, the original model, is called the L12.12. L for Lacoste.
I was going to say, what does that mean?
So it's 12. There's a little bit of, maybe a debate about what the 12 means, but it's probably the type of fabric that was used.
Okay.
The one stands for the design.
Gotcha.
And this was truly innovative sportswear. And here's the thing. Lacoste is considered to be one of the first brands to actually feature a visible logo on their clothing. Like that was a big change.
It was a statement.
Right.
It was.
So initially it was mostly white shirts designed for tennis, but then things really took off in the 50s when they decided to expand into the American market.
Right.
And they do this through this partnership with 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, right? And so they create this brand, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Lacoste, which becomes insanely popular in the United States.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was everywhere. So it was after this partnership, around 1951, they start introducing polo shirts in different colors.
Right.
I mean, you can imagine just that change, right? You've got this comfortable, stylish sportswear. Now it comes in a whole bunch of different options.
Right, exactly. I mean, it wasn't just like a tennis thing anymore.
Right. Then in the 60s and 70s, under René's son Bernard, who takes over in 1963, they diversify their product line. You start seeing fragrances, eyewear, shoes, leather goods. I mean, that little crocodile is now appearing on all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And then by the 70s, Lacoste was a big player in the U.S. market.
Absolutely.
But like with any success story, competition starts popping up, right? So you see the rise of brands like Le Tigre, which also I think they had a panther or some sort of cat as their logo, trying to get a piece of that sportswear pie. But as one of the documentaries you sent, I think it was on YouTube, pointed out, it's really tough to compete with a brand that's already so recognizable.
Yeah.
Right? Like Lacoste at that point. So let's talk about that crocodile, because not all crocodiles are created equal, legally speaking, right?
Yeah.
So Lacoste has been involved in some trademark battles over the years. One of the ones that's really interesting was they went up against, get this, a dental practice in the UK.
What?
In 2008, that was using a similar crocodile logo. And Lacoste actually lost.
They lost.
They lost that one. The court basically said, look, these are totally different industries, clothing versus dental services, so there's like no chance of consumer confusion.
Right, like you're not going to accidentally, go get a root canal when you thought you were buying a shirt.
Exactly, right.
So I guess what that case really highlights is the importance of context in trademark law. I mean, a crocodile on a piece of clothing
Right.
means something very different than a crocodile associated with, dental care.
Right. Okay, so then more recently, 2024, there was a ruling in the Philippines involving a Singapore-based company called Crocodile. So this legal battle had been going on for like 20 years. And the Philippine Supreme Court ends up ruling against Lacoste, saying that there are enough visual differences between the two crocodile logos for Crocodile, the other brand, to be able to register their mark in the Philippines.
Interesting.
And then there was that whole saga with the Hong Kong-based crocodile garments. I mean, that was like two iconic reptile brands going head-to-head, right?
Wow.
So they eventually reached a settlement where Crocodile Garments agreed to tweak their logo to make it look different. They made their crocodile scalier. They gave it bigger eyes. They changed the tail to be vertical. Apparently, the main thing that set them apart was which way the crocodile was facing.
Okay.
Right? So Lacoste's crocodile, which was registered in France back in 1933, faces to the right.
Okay.
The Hong Kong crocodile, registered in the 40s and 50s, face to the left. So just goes to show you how, like, much detail matters when you are protecting, a visual identity for a brand.
Absolutely, yeah. Those trademark disputes really underscore how crucial brand identity is in a global marketplace. I mean, companies go to, some pretty serious lengths to protect their intellectual property.
Right.
Now, shifting gears a little bit, it's important to acknowledge that, like any brand that's been around for a long time, Lacoste has seen its share of controversies over the years.
Yeah. Right.
Back in 2011, they faced accusations of censorship regarding their sponsorship of the 𝗚𝗲𝗳𝗃𝗍 Art Prize.
Right.
So they decided to withdraw an entry from a Palestinian artist, 𝗚𝗲𝗽𝗀𝗻𝗄. And her work, offered a certain vision of a Palestinian state. And while Lacoste said the artwork didn't fit the theme of the competition, which was la joie de vivre, the joy of living,
Right.
a lot of critics saw this as a political decision.
Oh, wow.
Right. And it raised questions about the role of corporations when they're influencing artistic expression.
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky territory. Yeah. And the Élysée Museum, actually, they ended up breaking ties with Lacoste over that incident.
Wow.
So then, 2020, we saw a different kind of controversy. Lacoste decided to end its collaborations with the rappers 𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 and Romeo Elvis after there were these allegations of sexual assault.
Ah.
Right. And the company said, very clearly, look, our values are respect and tolerance. Those are non-negotiable.
Right.
And then just last year, 2025, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Ibérica, which is, their branch in Spain, they were ordered by a court in Madrid to compensate a pregnant employee because they didn't make the right adjustments for her working conditions. And the court ruled it as, discrimination based on sex.
Right.
Said there were these unacceptable delays in conducting risk assessments, and they didn't provide her with, suitable alternative arrangements. So these examples show that even brands that have been around for a long time, they're still subject to scrutiny about their social and ethical practices.
Yeah. It's interesting. These kinds of controversies, they often force brands to re-examine, what they say their values are. And how those values actually play out in the real world, both in their image, but also, within the company itself. So, I guess kind of moving on from that, how has Lacoste managed to navigate, the fashion industry, which is always changing? I mean, how do they stay relevant? They even had, some big comebacks in popularity over the years.
Yeah. Back in the early 90s, they kind of lost some of their cool factor, right?
Right.
They became associated with like an older demographic.
Right.
Their connection to younger people started to kind of weaken.
Right.
And some of the articles that you sent in, they call this a period of brand management challenges.
Yeah. That's a polite way of saying, yeah, things weren't going so great.
Right, exactly. So this is where, rebranding comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like you gotta make some changes. So in 2000, they make this huge move. They bring in Christophe Lemaire as their creative director. And he really played a key role in revitalizing their image. He brings in this more modern aesthetic, but he still keeps the core, heritage elements of the brand, right?
Right.
They also, around this time, start taking back more control of their branding and licensing agreements. Like they realize we need to kind of rein this in.
Right, we need to take the reins back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So clearly it works because under the leadership of CEO Thierry Guibert, they've had this huge financial growth. They even set this goal of reaching 4 billion euros in sales by 2028, 2030.
Wow. That's ambitious.
Yeah.
So it's clear that the brand has experienced a resurgence.
Yeah. Even back in 2005, they were reporting some pretty impressive numbers. Almost 50 million products sold.
Wow.
In 110 countries.
That's global reach.
Right. And in 2007, they launched their e-commerce platform in the U.S., which was like a huge deal because it gave them a more direct connection to customers.
That's key, being able to go directly to the consumer.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have the subsequent creative directors that they bring in, Philippe Oliveira-Baptista in 2010, and then Louise Trotter in 2018.
Who, was the brand's first female creative director, which is pretty significant.
All right.
And then most recently, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 initiatives, and they all contributed to keeping the brand dynamic and relevant, right? Because the fashion world is always changing.
Yeah, you got to stay ahead of the curve.
Right.
And you can't underestimate the power of, brand ambassadors.
Right.
So partnering with someone like Novak Djokovic back in 2017, and then more recently with, rising talents like Arthur Fils, alongside established figures like Pierre Niney and Wang Yibo and previous ambassadors like Andy Roddick and 𝗏𝗏𝗳𝗏𝗀𝗀. It just reinforces that connection to both sport and pop culture, right? It's a really smart move.
Absolutely. It helps to broaden their appeal.
Yeah. And then collaborations have been a big part of, how they've stayed current. They've done everything from, high fashion partnerships with like Jean-Paul Goude, streetwear giants like Supreme to more playful stuff with like Disney and even the video game Minecraft, and then even musical tie-ins with like Bruno Mars.
Wow.
Right? And they did a collection inspired by Netflix. I mean, all these partnerships, they help them reach a wider audience, right? Bring in new people who might not have, thought of Lacoste before.
Absolutely. It's a way to, tap into different interests and kind of keep things fresh. I really like the limited edition campaigns they did.
Oh, yeah.
Like the one in 2018 where they swapped out the crocodile logo for endangered species.
Yeah, that was a good one.
To raise awareness for the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. That was a clever way to use their, iconic symbol for a good cause.
Yeah.
And then, who can forget the limited edition polos with the LED crocodiles in 2012 or the ones with Swarovski crystals? I mean, a little bit of that unexpected flair can really generate buzz. Right, for sure. So looking forward now, sustainability is becoming a major focus for all brands, globally. And Lacoste is, they're getting involved in that space as well.
Absolutely. I mean, they introduced organic cotton polos back in 2019, and they have this goal of using 100% sustainable materials in their products by 2025.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
They're also doing things to reduce their water consumption during production, and they've launched eco-friendly sneaker lines that use recycled materials. I mean, and then their participation in the Fashion Pact, shows that they're serious about environmental responsibility within the fashion industry as a whole.
They're also really trying to push into the U.S. sportswear market even more. I mean, they're aiming to double their sales in the U.S. from $400 million.
Wow.
Which means opening new store. I think they even have plans to open up on Fifth Avenue.
Oh, wow. Prime real estate.
Right. And then also working with big box retailers.
Right.
So they're looking at a 25% boost in annual sales, which would put them at 4 billion euros overall. That's a big goal.
But they're not just focused on clothes. They recently signed a deal with 𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 just last year, 2022, for a new perfume line. It's called Lacoste Original, launching this year.
Oh, I like that.
They've got Pierre Niney, the French actor, as the face of the campaign.
Oh, cool.
So strategically, they're really hitting those key areas, apparel, accessories, fragrance. They want to have a really comprehensive brand presence.
Right.
So as of 2025, to give you some numbers, Lacoste is valued at over $2.5 billion.
Wow.
They're pulling in over $2 billion in revenue every year.
That's huge.
They have a global workforce of over 10,000 employees, a massive retail network of, get this, over 1,100 stores worldwide.
Wow.
And a really strong online presence.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is their revenue from Asia is actually now bigger than what they're making in Europe. And the U.S. is their biggest market outside of France.
It's really cool to see that breakdown geographically, right?
Yeah.
And even like their website analytics show a pretty even split between men and women, with the biggest age group being like 25 to 34.
So they're hitting that younger demographic.
Yeah. Which is really important for them, right?
Absolutely.
And a 58% brand awareness among sneaker owners in the U.S., that's pretty big.
Yeah. So it shows they're still relevant, especially in that market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's like, this brand that has both like a rich history and a strong contemporary appeal.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I think it's fair to say that Lacoste's impact is bigger than just clothes, right?
Right.
I mean, they revolutionized tennis fashion.
Yeah.
Moving away from those, more formal, kind of stuffy garments of the past. They were one of the first to really popularize the visible logo, which is everywhere now.
Yeah.
They also, I think, did a great job of merging, fashion and function in sportswear.
Right.
Which basically created a whole new category of clothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And culturally, the brand has been on a really interesting journey. Like, they were a staple of preppy fashion in the 80s. Yeah. But then they had this resurgence in the early 2000s when hip-hop artists started wearing them, which I think shows how adaptable they are.
Yeah.
They were even featured in, the Wolf of Wall Street. Princess Diana was known to wear Lacoste.
Wow.
Right? And then their sponsorship of major sporting events like the French Open since 1971 and their association with golf through the Ryder Cup, it keeps them connected to, like, their roots.
Yeah, they haven't forgotten where they came from.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, and they're popular in other sports, too, like polo, sailing, even cricket.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should also mention the Lacoste Foundation, which supports education and sports programs around the world. So it's not just about selling clothes, it's about giving back.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's wrap this up with a quick recap.
Okay.
From a nickname on the tennis court to a bet, a kind of whimsical bet, Lacoste has become this multi-billion-dollar global brand.
Yeah. It's a real success story.
It's a story about athletic innovation, really smart branding strategies, and the ability to adapt to the ever-changing market. And we talk about how the, iconic crocodile has navigated legal battles, social controversies, and all the ups and downs of the fashion world.
And remain relevant. I mean, that's key.
Right, exactly.
So, thinking about everything we talked about, the evolution of the logo, their expansion beyond just sportswear and their commitment to, sustainability. I mean, it makes you wonder, what's the next chapter for Lacoste?
Right.
Right. What's next for the crocodile? Are we going to see them, integrate technology into their clothing even more?
Right.
Will they, dive deeper into environmental sustainability, maybe go beyond what they're doing now? Or, maybe they'll do something totally unexpected and go back to their sporting roots in a new way. I mean, whatever it is, it's clear that this is a brand that's not afraid to change, to evolve.
Right.
So, their next move will be something to watch.
Absolutely. Okay, that was a great one.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
A lot to think about there. We'll be back with another deep dive soon.
Okay.
Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Sounds good.